All right, so here we go for the Ranked League Champions number 5. We're once again inviting players based on their LP, which can be found on my Discord. On my Discord. In the different channels, players have joined in to queue up and find matches against each other, playing best of threes, earning ELO and LP, qualify for the tournament today. So for our top players who are in it now, we have Extraordinary Life Felix, Razel, Golden Eagle, Noob for Life, Platypus, Valkanos, Call Harmon, and Deadly Bunnies. So if you recognize any of them, feel free to cheer them on. And for my co-caster today, we have once again Dactor. Feel free to introduce yourself, shoutouts, and so on.
Well, I've been on here, I think, every single one of these tournaments so far. So
I think so.
If you've been watching these, you're probably relatively familiar. I guess shout out to, I don't know, XMT Clan? Sure, shout out to XMT Clan. We have a couple of members in today's tournament. Actually, I think they're playing against each other in the first round because, you know, that tends to happen for whatever reason.
Yep. It's always a clan curse to get matched against each other. Now, I think that's about all we have to cover for our first match. We'll be moving into Valkanos and Platypus with them picking and banning now. So let's get into it. Yeah, the defensive formations here for Skaven are definitely quite powerful, and in general pretty strong against vampire counts, just running the risk of playing into a style that they're very familiar with. So with that out of the way, I guess I'll take over the vampire counts to start off. And it's going to be a bunch of, the usual zombies, crypt ghouls. You have infantry, and this time deciding for Graveguard, which is usually the main choice on the infantry front for vampire counts. So they should last long as they don't take too much AoE. The usual double White King too. They do indeed have Scabscrath. Amazing versus the unarmored Skaven. And very good against one of the elite units that we'll be seeing in just a second. Along with a Heinrich Kemmler on foot. Much harder to snipe out. Oh no, on a horse. But nevertheless, harder to snipe out than many flying lords. And also with his summon, he can bring up Krell for that anti-large against Skaven blob monsters. They can't really flee since they're in a blob. A bunch of Black Knights too to chase off infantry, crypt horrors. It's pretty standard stuff. Really, nothing too crazy on the vampire counts front.
There is one off-meta pick though. Heinrich Kemmler, if you look at his spells, he does have Wind of Death. So we'll have to see if Valkanos is able to get use out of that. He very well might, because on the Skaven front, we do indeed have a very tight formation. It looks like it's fronted by some Clanrat Spears, with a few Skaven Slave Spears in the back. We have the Council Guard, Stormvermin ROR, the Blightscab's Plague Pack, the Plague Monk Sensor Bearer ROR for the magic damage. We have a couple of Poisoned Wooden Gladiators, Deathmaster Snicketch, an Assassin, a Plague Priest on the Bell, and double Helped Abomination. So basically a single entity blob, just with some trimmings.
Yeah. Now, let's see. For the nuances of single entity blobs, although generally easier to control, what are still the things that both players will have to focus on microing here?
Well, the Skaven will want to protect their Poison Wind Gladiators as much as possible, and I think the biggest thing for them really will be trying to dodge or mitigate AoEs, given that they're in such a tight formation, and the counts did bring double Scabscrath and Wind of Death.
Yeah, and really avoiding those heavy hitting attacks will be extremely important. You're wondering why my answers are extremely generic. It's because I forgot to set the title, but it's set now, and we're heading into the game. It's going to be a slow march from both players. And usually for Skaven, the idea is that they want to keep a close eye on those two White Kings. you have a strong sense of how of the range of Scabscrath, you can actually dodge it, although it is quite difficult. We'll see how that goes. There's also the problem that the cavalry for vampire counts is going very far away into the distance. We'll see if that ends up coming into play, but they will be able to secure the flank. And it's going to be the usual, sending in some zombies to engage while using abilities as a vampire counts.
Yep, it's pretty much about buying time because the vampire counts really want to delay as much as possible. It's like they almost want to kite, but they don't have missile play, so they have to just sacrifice a zombie. Now a nice Scabscrath comes in and just... That might have been a double Scabscrath, actually. It literally one-shot the Plague Monk Sensor Bearer ROR, pretty much.
I think so, by the looks of it. Positioned slightly off center.
Mortar or Globadier fire coming in onto the Crypt Horrors, onto the Grave Guard, and the Crypt Ghouls all at once. Definitely going to be some high value there.
Now, the positional advantage. There are actually flanks that can be charged by these Black Knights. And also with the Sensor Bearers routing off, chasing them off will be the way to optimize play for the counts. As for the monstrous units of the Skaven, they'll be looking for priority targets, chasing off the cavalry. And we'll have to see how that goes. Hopefully this isn't a crash, and it's not, thankfully. So we're seeing a lot of routes from the Skaven front line. It means the Globadiers won't be able to fire off as much, and that the Council Guard will have to cover the front line soon, leaving the back open to the Black Knights for charging.
Yeah, and we have not seen a Wind of Death yet. Probably going to want to wait until the Council Guard are locked in place by something before he casts that off. And of course, it's also competing with summons, so possibility we just won't see it at all. Now, definitely a good job so far from the Counts of breaking through the front line, but they do have a lot of units engaged at once, which can be dangerous against a Mortis effect like the Plague Priest has. So we will have to see if that Plague Priest is able to get huge value.
Oh, and Snickage.
Ooh, it looks like Wind of Death coming down onto this blob of clan rats and Skaven slaves. Ooh. And it will do a lot of damage, although not really the highest value targets. Probably only like 150 or 200 gold of damage value, actually, despite the fact that it did kill 2 units. It will allow him to get into the back, though, and rout off that Poison Wind Globadier, so perhaps worth it.
Yep, and now we're heading into the mid stage of this fight, where it's going to rely heavily on the single entities. The Vampire Counts don't have a lot of single entity fighting power without a Dragon Lord for cycle charging. So keeping the White Kings alive, I feel, will be quite important. Same with the Crypt Horrors. Another Scabscrath goes down. Only clips the Council Guard and doesn't do too much damage. But the single entities here for the Skaven are getting quite surrounded now. It means that the White Kings can find priority targets, and they don't have to worry as much about getting gooned out. But nevertheless, Snickage still finding a pretty nice target, and killing a White King is going to be huge. They're actually very good in the late game.
Yeah, like you said, not a lot of single entity killing power on this Vampire Counts roster. However, Snickage is actually getting beaten up by the White Kings. The 2 White Kings ganging up on him.
2 very nice hits, showing their prowess. And if he can keep them alive, they will do extremely well. A zombie summon comes down to actually keep them safe. And it looks like they're fighting the Hell Pit, but not disengaging. A little bit risky. We'll have to see how that plays out. Meanwhile, in the back, the cavalry's just cleaning up the infantry. But it means that they're not cycle charging the Council Guard, and also not supporting by surrounding the single entities here. In the meantime, the summons are now breaking. But the Mortis engine from the Bell is still quite scary. There's a chance that the Vampire Counts will actually run out of infantry here. The fight goes on long enough. And yeah, it really depends on how quickly he can take out these troops. If he has a Wind of Death, it would be amazing versus the Council Guard now. But based on the Winds of Magic usage, he might not be able to do that.
No, I doubt he can. And the Crawl Summon is down in the middle of the Council Guard, not really getting the value it wants. It wants to be, you know, killing Snickage, maybe killing the Plague Priest, but instead, it's kind of trapped up. Now, he is breaking down the Council Guard slowly but surely, and the balance of power is looking quite good for the Vampire Counts, but he does have to, do a good job of breaking the Hell Pit's leadership, and kind of, it might honestly come down to Hell Pit RNG at this point, too.
Yeah, of course, their ability to heal up at low HP will likely be triggered. There's nothing that can really hit hard enough to make sure that doesn't happen. And a couple big heals could definitely swing the tide of battle. Shattering it, of course, or getting it to rout would be a much better option, but not always possible.
Now, Snickage is getting taken out in the back here by Krell, which, oh man, he gets terrified actually. And that, if the counts are able to chase him off, then that would pretty much decide the game, I think.
Yeah, not to mention, it's a leadership debuff for the Hell Pit Abomination too, and it's very close to routing, but just barely manages to come back. Means that it might get its too horrible to die proc, and that would be very big for Skaven. There is still a big problem though. The Stern's men are still at very high HP, and they will hold for a very long time. Not to mention Snickage too is also on the verge of routing once again. And once he's off the battlefield, you can usually expect mass routs from the Skaven.
Yeah, and it does look like the Counts are going to be able to take this game. It was a pretty cool pick, actually, to take Kemmler with the Krell summon. Very easy to get value out of that when facing, single entity blob, which you can reasonably expect from from Skaven in this matchup, I think.
Yeah,
so I am a big fan of that pick.
Yeah, it worked out decently well too, although not getting a whole ton of value. Breaking the front line of the Skaven is always important if they have stuff like those Poison Wind Mortars in the second line, throwing their globes. And there we go. So pretty straightforward win, very standard play from both players really, but I think Valkanos did manage to take out some better engagements. Even though Platypus did bite back, killing out a White King himself, just by being able to kill out the Censor Bearers, a huge play, keeping the Hell Pit Abominations busy in infantry, and also being able to rout off lords like Snickage those are the plays that that help you creep ahead in this type of matchup. So there we go. Nice 10-minute game to kick us off as we move on to the next one. I guess I'll begin with the I'll start with Bretonia here, as we do see a little bit of spiciness actually from their picks. Going for Royal Pegasus Knights. I believe these guys are a little bit more uncommon versus Norsca, but great since they can actually get a charge in. If there's not a lot Norsca can bring to countercharge them, as they definitely don't want to be fighting in the air game. So these guys will be keeping a close eye on them. They're very much glass cannons too, so if they are used improperly, it will generally turn out very badly for Bretonia. For their front line, the usual peasant mobs, and in this case, a little bit thicker with the men-at-arms. They'll just hold for slightly longer, but it won't be a whole ton. They'll just be able to clear up some weakened marauders, so really using that cavalry well will be important. Let's see, 2 ROR knights, 1 questing, 1 Knights of the Realm. Just not too elite, but they'll be great for charging down infantry. They can still charge down monsters too, but they don't want to be staying in the fight for too long. Paladins and Fey Enchantress, very meta, great for hitting Wolfric. And of course, one of them does have Guardian with the physical resist buff. So all around, pretty standard. Of course, one of the archers too will be expected to be Ox Arrows. That's it for Bretonia.
All right, on the Norscan side, we have a couple of Warhounds vanguarded in the back, including the Beast of Tashnar. We have a couple of skirmish cavalry, looks like some Marauder Horsemen and Marauder Horse Masters, just to, zone out any horse archers, harass peasant bowmen, get in some free damage. You almost always see these guys. We're going to have, it looks like, only 2 Marauders, and instead we're going to actually have most of the infantry It's going to be 4 Marauder Berserkers, which is quite interesting. They'll certainly rip through the Bretonnian front line exceptionally quickly, but also very expensive and very, very squishy to bowfire. We will see, it looks like the Miststalkers and 1 Famir Great Weapons. And then we're going to have actually Throg rather than Wulfric, and a Shaman Sorcerer of Death with Spirit Leech and Soul Blight.
Yeah, generally nothing too crazy. Pretty standard all around. We'll just have to see how well the control happens here. The horsemen, it is very important that they are able to eventually collapse on the archers, or maybe, well, in this case, it's just Spirit Leech. So that will likely be the deciding factor here. Of course, the wolves can dive in on the back too, as there isn't a whole ton of cavalry from Bretonnia. But if those archers are left alone to live, they will be able to pick away at the Fimir, given enough time. With the Berserkers getting a cycle charged by infantry, but instead actually opting to shoot the Berserkers, also not a terrible option. And if done well enough, Bretonnia could actually win the frontline fight here. We'll keep an eye on that.
I don't think that the men-at-arms will hold long enough for that to happen, but we'll have to see. Now, the Royal Pegasus Knights are starting to move over this Norscan formation, and actually the Beasts of Tashnar are getting caught out here by the Companions of Canel. The Companions may be a little bit overkill in this matchup, but they will actually do exceptionally well at killing Famir if they manage to get onto them straight up. Now, the 1 Vanguarded Norscan Warhound actually managing to get into the Peasant Bowmen, and there really isn't anything protecting these Peasant Bowmen, unfortunately, so these Berserkers and Marauders are managing to push through onto them without much resistance. And this definitely seems fairly disastrous, I think, for the Bretonnians.
Yeah, the front lines are collapsing, and the Pegasus Knights are having a little bit of a hard time finding value. Although now it looks like they may be able to chase off the Miststalkers, which is a very nice pick. And even if their infantry does die, finishing off these monsters will let them cycle charge for quite a long time. Not to mention the Fey Enchantress too could single-handedly carry out the infantry fight. Although it does mean that the archers will get continuously pushed back.
Now, Throg is actually getting beaten up pretty badly by the double paladin. And if he goes down, then that's definitely going to be enough to turn this game in the favor of the Bretonnians, I think, as the Miststalkers get picked off by the Royal Pegasus Knights and the Companions of Canel in the back. And yeah, a lot of it is going to just come down to this central fight here, with the Fey Mortis effects constantly draining this, little Norscan blob that's formed. But the Fey Enchantress is actually taking a lot of damage. She still has over 2,000 HP, so she probably shouldn't rout. And a regrowth actually going down onto her as well, just to ensure that she stays in the fight for a while. As it looks like the Bretonnia is going to bring in a lot of support from the Royal Pegasus Knights and the Companions of Canel, but the Norscans still pretty heavily outnumber them here.
Yeah, despite the infantry advantage, the actual elite units are falling, with their lords getting low. Of course, Throg does have regen, but not as much healing as the Fey Enchantress. And Norska does not have their skirmish cavalry here, actually opting to chase off cavalry instead may lose them the center fight.
Yeah, and a big, rock drop or whatever it's called for the Fey, coming in and actually nuking all of the infantry support. And that means Throg is now isolated by himself in the middle of a ton of Bretonnian cavalry, and he's going to get taken down. And with that, I think the Bretonnians have gained a decisive edge in this battle.
Yeah, that is extremely rough. Leadership is very important for a lot of the Chaos factions. And without Throg and a good number of infantry left for Bretonnia, even though the Marauders, the Berserkers, and the Hounds are able to clear up the infantry, there is just a little bit too much elite Bretonnian, too many elite Bretonnian units here to actually finish off with skirmishers.
Yeah, and I mean, the Fey is just going to be... I mean, honestly, the Fey could possibly solo kill most of the rest of this build, just because she is so tanky and has that Mortis effect constantly going. So I definitely don't like this position for Valkanos. Now, the Royal Pegasus Knights actually end up being a really cool pick. Able to go into the back and maybe support the Companions of Canel a little bit better than Valkanos expected. They pretty much nuke the Miststalkers, and then they're able to come in and also get some really high value charges into that center blob. So it's a really cool pick, actually.
Yeah, the extra mobility really helped them circle around, and for sure, I think they likely did quite well. Some very major plays too, being able to bounce between the center fight and the Fimir. Yeah, they definitely worked out. In terms of actually countering them, really it's Marauder Horsemen, the same answers you would usually give for cavalry. And although they are more mobile, they're a little bit more weak to getting caught out. But in this case, it looks like they did manage to hold, with the Platypus looking quite confident now with a likely second win. Just taking a look around, even if these horsemen do use up the rest of their ammunition, it really will not be enough to deal with the Bretonnians here.
Yeah, and just to correct you there, actually, this would tie the series rather than end it. So we would be going to an ace match if the Bretonnians are able to finish this one off. Now, the Pegasus Knights are getting Spirit Leeched. That's actually killing quite a few models. However, they are diving in onto the Shaman Sorcerer of Death now. And when he goes down, I think that'll pretty much spell the end of this game. There really still is not anything to kill even the single entities for the Bretonnians, so...
Yeah, the single entity advantage is quite strong. And now I'm wondering if those Spirit Leeches, if they had been focusing the Pegasus Knights earlier on, maybe that would have been a much scarier counter, but perhaps we missed them. Perhaps it would not have made a huge impact, but at the end of the game there, it actually took out quite a few models.
I think at the start of the game, it actually wouldn't have taken models. I think Pegasus Knights have a high enough HP per model count that it would only do HP damage, which could be healed up by Fae. So I understand prioritizing the Companions of Canel instead, especially since the Companions are such an existential threat to Fimir. But yeah, once they take a little bit of damage, just chip damage from Marauder Horsemen or whatever, then yeah, the Pegasus Knights are definitely able to be killed very quickly by Spirit Leech because of their low model count.
Yeah, and just looking at the damage values for the game, we can clearly see there were quite a few trades that went down. Definitely the heroes trading into each other, but some very important points is that the Fimir were not really able to get their damage value, and even though the Hounds were able to shut down the archers by the end of the game, it was not a big enough play to pull back those Fimir getting picked off. Same with the heroes. Now, starting off with this 8th match against Valkanos and Platypus. Gonna be a greenskin mirror matchup, and I'll be starting off with Valkanos' greenskins looking to be a heavy skirmishing force of Spider Rider archers, along with, I think, some Wolf Riders, but mostly focusing on those Spider Riders. They are great for their ability to chase off units, and their ammunition, although not as impactful, still great for poking away, especially if your opponent doesn't have many skirmishers themselves. Especially good for Savage Orc Big Guns. For his core, he has some Orc Big Guns himself, not Savage for that armor, great for holding up against skirmishers, Orc Boys, and of course some Trolls mixed in, except in this case, instead of Stone Trolls, we have the Swamp Things for their melee attack debuffs with, let's see, 30 meter radius, -6 melee attack, not amazing, but they also bring terror, and with an army like this, terror will be needed. Normal trolls are still good, they have high AP, but are more vulnerable to archer fire. Of course, the Lord 2, it's the River Troll Hag and Grom, with nothing special. It's the usual loadout, but with the leadership debuff on the Hag.
All right. So on the side of the Platypus, we have Grom the Paunch. We have a Black Orc Big Boss for the... We actually have double AoE immune to Psychology auras. We also have a Giant River Troll Hag with Doom and Darkness and Spirit Leech again. We have a backline of Orc Biggins and Savage Orc Biggins. with some goblins providing the chaff. We have a triple stone troll, which relatively common, but uncommon. We have it looks like only a few goblin wolf riders, not any missile cab. Definitely surprising. This does afford a lot of battlefield control over to Valkanos, which we've already discussed the importance of. I guess the platypus, hoping that his double immune to psychology auras will be enough to prevent his units from routing.
That will be especially important, but at this point, I'm a little bit worried about that. Those Savage Orc big guns, and also the skirmishers are much, much weaker for the platypus. Getting out-builded here in this case. They'll likely be able to get chased off by these spider skirmishers. You can see the Goblin Wolf Rider archers already on the verge of routing, but as the main engagement happens, we'll have to see how these trolls fare against each other.
Yeah, and there is actually no source of terror, I think, on the platypus's side. So he does have the immune to psychology auras, but he actually won't be getting full advantage of that just because he has nothing to provide terror himself. And it's actually kind of funny. There's no immune to psychology auras on Valkanos' side, so that would have been quite valuable.
Yeah, and immediately we're seeing in the center the stone trolls getting routed off. A very rough start for the platypus, and a good counter charge from Valkanos, using his infantry to tank the charges from the trolls, and a big fanatic bomb comes down too, melting the Savage Orc big guns, and generally stabilizing that right flank. Oh man, stone trolls even getting shattered.
Yeah, but on the other hand, somehow the platypus has managed to get some rear charges in with his very few cavalry coinciding with the Doom and Darkness, and now he's going to get the first wah off, which typically is a pretty big advantage. However, it does seem like Valkanos does just have the stronger build, and unfortunately Grom, off in the Shadow Realm, chasing some Forest Goblin Spider Rider archers, rather than actually assisting in the frontline fight. And the Giant River Troll Hag of the Platypus actually gets shattered as well. I'm not sure how that even happened, but Doom and Darkness upgraded coming down now onto the Platypus, the few, center blob units he has remaining, and these stone trolls are routing off with full models. Black Orc Big Boss is being left alone to fight Grom and some trolls, and so yeah, it does appear that Valkanos is very decisively ahead in this game right now.
Yeah, those initial charges have really stabilized. The infantry have mostly traded into each other, but the troll advantage is huge. Not to mention Valkanos also has his skirmishers still operational, and the fact that his lord is able to stay in the fight while Grom is pushing back skirmishers means that he's getting a lot more value there. Stone Trolls too now getting chased off by Forest Goblin Spider Riders. There's not much that the platypus can do here to actually counter that, and that is a huge loss. Perhaps some Wolf Riders will be able to save it there, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I think even if he did save it, at this point, the game is too far gone for him to be able to come back. This is a really unforgiving matchup that, tends to end very quickly. And we are seeing that here. Just the volatile nature of the matchup, really.
Yep, with now Lords getting picked off. Really, the cascading effect of mass routes can be extremely rough. And man, those Goblin Wolf Riders, really, even trying to chase down the Forest Goblin Spider Riders, were not able to peel them off. And now Grom is surrounded. It looks like that will be a swift victory for Valkanos in this game.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think it looked like Grom had about 100 gold value over the course of the game. He definitely needed to do more there. Just getting distracted, perhaps, maybe a little bit flustered even by Valkanos' skirmishing corps. It's easy to do when someone comes in a matchup you're maybe not the most familiar with and they have something you didn't expect. It's very easy for you to overreact and maybe a misplay just because of that.
Yeah, and build-wise, it definitely felt very advantaged from the start with that mobility advantage. Of course, you can't punish it by going for different builds, but in this case, when you contest the mobility and lose it that badly, it sets you up to be in a pretty rough position. Looking at the values between the two Grom, the Paunches, the winning Grom here with like almost 1300 more damage value than the other. That is absolutely huge, almost a stone troll's worth of damage. So there we go. A nice greenskin versus greenskin matchup as we move on to the semifinals. Well, I'll start with the Lizardmen. As we see, no solar engines, a little bit unorthodox, a good number of ranged troops, and 2 units Saurus Warrior Shields with the 1 Temple Guard, opting instead to go more heavy on the cavalry, 2 Cold One Riders, and cutting a lot less on the infantry front, putting more into skirmishers. The Lord, too, is a Slann Mage Priest of Fire, which I'm pretty sure is quite uncommon with 2 Pterodon Riders, one of them being the ROR. Definitely, there's a lot going on with this Lizardmen build. By the looks of it, it is going to be pretty heavy skirmishing, and still having that Temple Guard power to finish off large targets in the late game, along with the Salamander with the Umbral Tide.
Yeah, and it was a very quick counter pick from Cal Harmon, so I'm sure he's practiced in this matchup. It's not like he doesn't know what the meta builds are, he just prefers this one. Now, to face that, on the Norscan side, we have a couple of golden rank triple chevron Marauder champions with great weapons, which I have never seen before. So a little bit of spice on both sides. We then have a couple of cheap Marauders in the front line, 3 in total. 2 Marauder Berserkers in the back, and 2 Marauder Hunters with Javelins as the main ranged component. We also have a couple of Marauder Horse Masters and the Beast of Tashnar as the mobility core. Not very heavy on mobility, and I'm actually wondering if the Pterodon Riders might be able to bully the Norscan range this game with their rock drops and their ranged fire. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I think in this case, the Marauder Horsemen might be able to counter them. And the fact that there aren't a whole ton of monsters either from the Lizardmen side is a nice sign for Norska. They won't be relying on their ranged nearly as much.
Yeah, I am quite curious about the triple Golden Chevron Marauder champions with great weapons. They'll be able to perform well. This does seem like it'd be a relatively good situation for them, just given the fact that Cal Harmon doesn't have any huge monsters to bully them. Although the great weapons would also, do pretty good damage to dinos if the dinos got caught up in them.
Yeah, the main problem is that they will be facing skirmisher fire, and as the game starts off, we're seeing these chameleon skinks that I did mostly just ignore in the army setup. Yeah, they are actually quite a pain for Norska here. It's hard to catch them with your Marauder cavalry, just because they'll be able to easily run back to their infantry lines. Pterodon Riders too will be hard to shut down as long as they stay out of the range of the javelins, but the high armor of these Marauder champions holding up decently well. They've taken quite a few volleys of javelins and darts now, while being able to maintain a lot of their HP.
Yeah, now the Umbral Tide in the back, I think, are going to be, the biggest thing that decides this game, because they can kill a lot of infantry very quickly if they're able to shoot relatively unperturbed. But will the Norskins be able to get something back there to shut them down? And will they actually fire? Because it looks like he does not have them on fire at will, and they have not actually begun firing yet. Now,
huge
Blood Statue of Spite, and the rock drop coming down, dealing huge damage to these Marauder champions with great weapons. As the Umbral Tide begins firing in now onto, looks like they're actually focusing Wolfric, which I'm a little bit surprised by, but maybe they can do some good damage there.
And a banishment does come down on the Marauders, hits the better damage. Part of them. But a quarter damage, routes off the Berserkers too, is very nice.
A boat coming down.
Yep, and oh wow, it does pretty nice damage, especially hitting Saurus Spears. The main deciding factor here is if Norska is going to win the frontline engagement. They still have one healthy unit of champions.
Burning Head on the flank, actually more roasting Lizardmen units than the Norscan ones, is quite unfortunate. However, it does appear that is still going to be a relatively drawn engagement rather than going heavily towards one side or the other, as it looks like overall this front line is kind of a wash, with now the Pterodon Riders, especially the Powhawks and Sentinels, getting bursted down quite heavily by these Marauder Hunters with Javelins. However, the Cold One Riders coming in now should be able to get some really good damage onto those Marauder Hunters if they so choose to focus their attention there. However, they're instead going to attempt to break this Norscan front line, which they are doing a relatively good job of.
Yeah, with the Marauder champions on the verge of routing, they've chased off the Marauder Berserkers and are moving on to the Javelins now. And it's looking like Lizardmen is beginning to stabilize quite hard, having won out this front line.
Now, the Beast of Tashnar coming in onto the Umbral Tide. This could be a huge pick that could turn the game around, as the Umbral Tide are very squishy, and the Beast of Tashnar with their anti-large will be tearing through them very quickly. However, if the Lizardmen are able to stabilize, never mind, the game's over.
Oh, okay. Unexpected leave, but it was looking to be quite in the favor of the Lizardmen there. You do see Valkanos reading the situation and deciding to tap out. The main problem here really was that his main win conditions were having a very rough time. Wulfric just took too much damage from the Umbral Tide during the mid game, and the loss of his Marauder champions was really rough, having spent more than a quarter of his money into them, I think, or at least getting close to it, with them only making 500 damage each on average is definitely not enough value.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised by that pick still. Looking at them now in the army selection screen, they cost 1,500 gold apiece, which is almost unbelievable to spend that much on an infantry unit in general, let alone triple, like, what is it, ×9 ranked Marauder champions. But I mean, it's cool to see. Just didn't quite work out here.
Yeah, the unfortunate red crested skink pick 2 with 1,000 damage value, a unit costing what's it, almost a quarter of the price, getting the same amount of value just because they were able to cut up those champions without being too worried. So, for this second game, Valkanos against Khal Harmon, we have Wood Elves against Tomb Kings. And for the Wood Elf army of Khal Harmon, we have, indeed, Drycha coming in, presumably with Pendulum, and only Pendulum. Great versus Tomb Kings infantry, decent versus cavalry. A nice option if you actually want to collapse their front line. So looks to be the case, since we do indeed have some Dryads. We have a very strong cavalry force of Wild Riders, the Hunters of Kurnos, and no Stag Knights by the looks of it. Just since they are so common, sometimes not taking them is a good option, since your opponent will generally prepare for them. Instead, opting for more cavalry, taking Sisters of Thorn too for their buffs, and also Glade Guard with Starfire Shafts. Take down those constructs. A very aggressive build to Eternal Guard, and not to forget, this Glade Captain with her crazy anti-large is amazing versus many of the targets of the Tomb Kings. Yeah, War Dancers too, not to forget.
Those which are interesting.
Yeah, they'll be able to grind down the Tomb Kings infantry very quickly, so long as they're not taking shots themselves.
Yeah, not the most cost-effective unit, generally speaking, and they can definitely get bursted, but they might be able to do okay here. We'll have to see. For the Tomb Kings, it looks like we have a Lich Priest of Light with Net, Ark in the Black with Spirit Leech, and it looks like Fate of Buna as well. We do have a couple of Ushapti Greatbow, a Screaming Skull Catapult, the Eyes of the Desert Sepulchral Stalker ROR. We have a bunch of Skeleton Spearmen and some Tomb Guard for the infantry. And then we have a couple of Nehekara Horsemen and some Skeleton Horse Archers for the mobility. So relatively, bog standard Tomb King army here. Not teching too heavily into any particular thing. Just a lot of the units that are all pretty good against Wood Elves.
Yep, the main problem here That, of course, are going to have to deal with this aggressive Wood Elf rushed army of mixed infantry and cavalry. In fact, pretty uncommon to see a full, just normal mixed Wood Elf army. But with the new update, it's definitely a possibility. And I think I would place my bets on maybe the Wood Elves here, unless the Ushabti take big hits into the cavalry. That will likely be a deciding play here.
Yeah, and whether or not the Screaming Skull Catapult gets good RNG onto the Glade Guard will be quite huge. This is actually, I think, I don't know if I'd call it a meta Wood Elf build here, but I don't think it's abnormal by any means. I think it's definitely one of the stronger options, just going with a Glade Guard kind of slow push style, because your infantry trade pretty well, your Glade Guard will eventually, get a ton of value in, and your cavalry also relatively decently, so I definitely like it. The Tomb King build, again, I don't think it's bad by any means. It's just a very standard sort of, hey, these units are all good against Wood Elves, so let's throw them all together. No Chariots is a little bit off meta, but not terribly so. I think it's like 50-50 maybe whether or not you get Chariots in this matchup. I am a little concerned with his infantry clearing ability, just because he only has the one catapult as well. A lot of times you see 2 or 3 here, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, and as the game gets underway, Tomb Kings are moving up. The Wood Elves have a little bit of a weaker flank, given the island in the middle, just being a pond. But perhaps this is also a blessing. It means that the mobility for the Tomb Kings won't be able to easily cycle charge the infantry, which are going to be one of the major threats coming in from the Wood Elves if they do manage to hit the front lines at fairly high HP. There's not a lot of AoE that the Tomb Kings can throw down, since, like you said, they do not have chariots to support here.
Yeah, and I mean, if the Tomb Kings are heavily disadvantaged in terms of infantry, it's always a problem. Now, we will actually see these Nehekara horsemen getting caught out here, and Sisters of Thorn are very fast, and they have poison. However, actually, does he not have them on fire at will? It looks like they are firing in, so I'm not... Okay, there we go. Finally, the Nehekara horsemen getting poisoned. But it takes long enough that the Nehekara horsemen are able to pull back. Now the Ushabti Greatbow firing in, but the trees are going to be blocking a lot of those shots. So not a terrible amount of damage. Now it looks like focusing down Drycha, which makes a lot of sense. She's the only caster and the Lord. So if you are able to burst her, it'll be very valuable. However, she has a relatively small hitbox, so she's not going to be taking a ton of damage by any means. I say that, she does take a pretty decent hit there, but the Screaming Skull Catapult firing in onto the Glade Guard is more likely to do a ton of damage. It has only gotten one hitted so far, so pretty good RNG so far for the Wood Elves. As now the Wood Elves are actually starting to get in towards the front line, as the Glade Guard are going to be firing in onto the Ushabti Greatbow and Sepulchral Stalkers in just a moment. And actually a really aggressive Pendulum manages to get a lot of damage down, surprisingly enough.
Yep, and we're seeing the first major threat for the Tomb Kings. The Glade Guard are in range and firing, but the horsemen are moving in to charge into them, but Wild Riders at the ready to shut down those horsemen should work out well. For the back line of the Wood Elves, there's some skirmish with cavalry, some charges moving in, but the Tomb King's front line is taking a lot of damage. However, War Dancers do get routed off, and it looks like the Tomb Kings may hold just yet.
Yeah, the Tomb Kings are relatively compromised, but they actually have a pretty nice play here, netting down the Sisters of Thorn, countercharging with the Nehekara Horsemen. However, these Wild Riders are doing a great job of peeling off the Nehekara Horsemen in the background. So the Glade Guard are able to continue firing in relatively unperturbed. Now, they are doing a ton of damage actually to the Ushabti Greatbow, bursting them down very quickly. And if the Tomb Kings lose all of the Ushabti Greatbow, then this Wood Elf Cavalry will not have a lot of counters.
Yeah, they'll be able to cycle charge to their heart's content, but the Tomb King's infantry is holding pretty well. The one major problem, though, those Glade Guard are still operational, And the Wood Elves are still making nice trades, especially with Arkan the Black taking a ton of damage. I'm not sure where that went down. But another net comes down on the Wild Hunters, which is nice. The Skeleton Horse Archers will have to disengage before they take too much damage.
Another really nice pendulum, by the way. These pendulums have been very aggressive, but Valkanos, maybe not 100% with his dodging, not able to avoid them, and they are getting huge damage in Drycha. Actually seeming like a very good pick here. Now, the Wood Elves are continuing to grind through. They are starting to run low-ish on infantry, but all of the Tomb King's value units are pretty much dead. And this Glade Captain even going in, killing some of the last Sepulchral Stalkers. And it definitely looks like this is very heavily favored for the Wood Elves at the moment.
Yeah, the single entities here for the Wood Elves have actually won out. Glade Captain plus Drycha, finishing off Arkan the Black. And man, those pendulums have been amazing. I really want to see Drycha's damage value going into the post-game screen. That was yeah, that was pretty rough. There were definitely some trades going down. Valkanos did manage to push away some infantry, but not enough. Some Dryads did still hold down the front line. Cavalry traded into themselves, but looking at the Glade Guard, they definitely paid for themselves. And Drycha, with 2,400 damage, is pretty scary. That's quite big.
You can see that all of the high-value Tomb King's units just not able to find success. The Stalkers, the Great Bows, and the Catapult all just kind of falling flat. The Catapult, unfortunately, missing almost all of its shots onto the tightly packed Glade Guard. Could have done a ton of damage if it had a little bit better RNG, but such is the risk with using that particular artillery piece. Now, yeah, I don't know. It's just a very solid Wood Elf build. The War Dancers kind of did terrible, but they did at least attract a lot of attention on their way in, which there's some value in that. And the rest of the build, just a very solid concept and executed very well with some great spell casting just to help break through that front line quickly.
Yeah, so that's going to be GG to Valkanos, and well played to Call Harmon, who will be moving into the finals of today's tournament. Bretonia, which is going to be looking like a pretty standard picks here. He will be facing Felix's Empire, and he's brought the usual front line of peasant mobs, some spears to support in the cavalry fight, and of course cavalry to take that fight. Questing Knights, one of them ROR. These guys are great for their AP damage, which when it comes to Empire and their heavily armored cavalry will trade up extremely effectively. The Lord choice is going to be Lewin to duke it out in the air if there is friends, or cycle charge any other lords that come in from Empire. He's also great in cavalry fights too, as opposed to just Enchantress and double Paladin. We did speak about this earlier also, with the double or triple field trebuchets, not the more expensive variant, which is better at sniping out single entities, but instead the ones that are better versus infantry and cannons. So a pretty standard Bretonia build, I think. And with that out of the way, let's get into the Empire build.
Sure thing. So the Empire has a front line of a couple of swordsmen. He also has some halberdiers around the flank. It looks like 4 in total. A back line of, it looks like 4 spearmen. Some with shields, some without. We have 1 mortar, 1 great cannon, a light wizard, Volkmar the Grim, and the silver bullets with another unit of generic handgunners, and finally in the back a single unit of Empire Knights. So very, very infantry heavy. Quite a defensive build with some defensive geometry as well. Should be pretty weak, actually, I think, to this triple trebuchet build, because the trebuchets will quite easily be able to kill that single great cannon, and after that is gone, they will be able to do a lot of damage over the course of the game to halberdiers, handgunners, and all of these value targets for the Empire.
Yeah, the artillery game is going to be very heavily favored on the Bretonnia side, and they have a few options here. They can even hammer down the handgunners, not the silver bullets as they are stealthed, but by taking out the handgunners, it frees up Lewin to cycle charge as much as he wants, and that will put Volkmar in a very rough position. Of course, he'll still have to be careful. The light wizard with his presumably a net and even a banishment is pretty scary. If some big misplays could definitely turn the tides of the battle here, especially if Lewin doesn't have his missile resist ability on if he has it on cooldown.
Yeah, and I'm not actually sure. It's 90 seconds. I'm not sure what the cooldown on net is. I would think that you could probably get a second net up in time if you want to invest Winds of Magic in that way.
Yeah, I think so, but it will also mean that Lewin has to get in range for that to happen. So just another quick little lag spike. We'll push through it though, as it looks like the game shall continue.
Yeah, so the trebuchets are going to be starting with some free damage under the Sigmar Suns. Now, interestingly, moving up the Peasant Bowmen before trying to deal with the mortars, which the mortars will do pretty good damage to the Peasant Bowmen if they are able to hit. It is, of course, quite random, but Empire mortars aren't too inaccurate. They are much more accurate, for example, than Coast mortars. So they should be hitting relatively consistently, I think. Now, also the cavalry coming up into range of the great cannons. I am curious what the Empire will prioritize. Honestly, I think they should probably just ignore the trebuchets for now and shoot at questing knights. But, of course, that's, relatively difficult to do. Just ignore the artillery when you have a defensive build like this.
Yeah, the main problem, though, when it does come down to artillery battles, is how much they're doing to the actual main army. See, a huge volley comes down on the handgunners, but by focusing artillery, you aren't really reducing your opponent's power to do damage. You're shutting down their long-term damage by firing at artillery. So it's two different choices, and it depends really on the key targets for this type of matchup. The cavalry now has moved into the forest, and it looks like they're preparing for a flank.
Yeah, the big problem with shooting at trebuchets is that I think you're unlikely to actually kill models before the cannon is shut down. So it's probably better just to get as much damage as you can in the meantime. But we'll have to see. The trebuchets are now focusing on the cannon, so it should go down quite quickly, unless there's some terrible RNG. But trebuchets are deadly accurate, so I wouldn't expect that to be the case.
Yeah. See, more rocks are coming down. They are pelting up the great cannon, and the fact that spears are placed nearby to defend them, it's actually putting them in the line of fire too. Right now, I think the early artillery game has gone quite heavily into the side of Bretonnia. Both sides opting to hold their ground, with Bretonnia edging forwards, just because with the cannons focusing trebuchets, eventually the Empire will pull ahead.
Well, you say that, but the cannon is now down under half HP.
Oh dear.
And it still has not killed a trebuchet model. Kind of as predicted, just because, yeah, trebuchets kill the crew so very quickly. It is kind of absurd, actually. I don't know if they win necessarily one-on-one against a cannon, but when they outnumber a cannon so heavily, they will almost certainly win the trade quite decisively like this. So.
Yeah, and with that new advantage, Golden Eagle now deciding to pull back. A nice play, or actually just because he doesn't really need to advance anymore. The cannon was really the main threat, forcing an engage. So this should work out pretty well. Now, Empire does still have a very heavy infantry advantage, and it's going to be on the cavalry to take them out. The Bretonnian archers, although strong, aren't very numerous. And Lewin can only be in so many places at once. So we'll see if Bretonnia ends up getting overrun here. But I presume not, just because of this questing knight advantage.
Yeah, I will say that I think the Fae would be stronger against this particular Empire build by a substantial margin, just because of the Mortis effect on all the infantry, and there really isn't a ton of single entity killing power aside from these handgunners on this Empire roster. So we'll have to see. Now, of course, Lewin will still be, quite scary. It's just that the mass halberdier and the handgunners over the course of the game shouldn't have too much trouble wearing him out.
Yeah, and they will likely be able to get into combat. They'll just have to really be careful that they don't get charged along the sides. Spreading out pretty wide means that he will be able to do more damage along all of the front line at the same time, but at the disadvantage of being more exposed to these cavalry rushes. Now, instead of actually focusing on the infantry, the Bretonian player here, focusing on diving in onto the back line. Not a bad option, since these backline tools are the main damage for Empire here. If they do only have infantry left at the end of the game, they'll likely just get cycle charged.
Yeah, this mortar is about to get shut down, and with that going down, the peasant bowmen will not have much to, shoot at them, but peasant bowmen already taking quite a bit of damage. It doesn't look like it's just down to one of them at this point. It is a pox arrow, which is quite nice for Bretonia, just to have that poison. But yeah, I am a little bit concerned for Bretonia being able to actually clear out all of this infantry. They should be able to do it, but it will take some good control and some patient play, I think.
Yeah, standing inside halberds is quite painful. They have their armor piercing, they're anti-large, and you really have to be able to cycle charge them. Now, a net has gone down on these ROR questing knights, but its full value won't really be appreciated as these handgunners get completely shut down by the charging questing knights here. They're now even bouncing between spear units, which is a great play, since the spears aren't really able to brace in this tight sort of engagement.
Oh my god. There was a banishment that actually immediately one-shot a spearman at arms, but then some bad RNG led to it completely one-shotting a halberdier unit as well. So unfortunately, a negative trade there for Volkmar's first bound banishment usage.
Yeah, and speaking of Volkmar, it looks like he's been hanging back to support the back line, but sort of ineffectively too. A lot of the handgunners have been routed, and Volkmar also isn't able to continue pushing up the front line, actually meaning that the Bretonians will be able to hold for quite a bit longer, keeping the trebuchets online, but more importantly, buying time for those questing knights to get a lot of value in. They've routed off the cannon, they've about to rout off this mortar, so it's just going to be the infantry left for Empire here, along with Volkmar.
Yeah, now the one saving grace for the Empire is that these are just questing knights, which are not very good at killing the lightly armored infantry of the Empire, just because, most of their damage is armor piercing, and that's kind of wasted given that state troops all have about 30 armor. However, they will still be trading up over the course of the game if they're able to just fire or charge in as much as they want. Now, Lewin diving in, actually baiting this huge blob around him, and the trebuchet is now firing in and doing a ton of damage.
Grand Soulfire does go down.
Grand Soulfire doesn't do friendly fire, but it will actually do decent damage to questing knights there.
Yeah, and the trebuchets too are getting shut down. Empire infantry finally managing to push through, but they're a little bit overextended. They don't have a ton of support. They'll have to mostly hold on their own, using their anti-large and the remaining Empire Knights that are still doing rather well. Lewin, too, is taking a lot of damage staying in this fight, but he will be able to heal it. And we'll have to see how that plays out in the late game. If he does get routed, that would be really terrible for Bretonia, though.
Yeah, he's taking a lot of damage, and he's just, caught up in all of these anti-large units, with Volkmar providing huge buffs. Now, this is a really nice charge. This is what Bretonia needs to be doing, is charging in and managing to rout off units and then chase them off the battlefield. Just very slow, patient play. However, the Empire is actually holding pretty firm, and the balance of power back to equal, and there really isn't a lot for the Bretonnians to shut down all of this infantry. It's just an overwhelming amount of anti-large that the Questing Knights aren't super equipped to deal with.
Yeah, he definitely needs to be comboing with Terror and finding these pockets to engage on. There is one that looks like he will be able to shut down, though. These Empire Knights and also these Swordsmen of the Empire will likely be getting run down by the cavalry here. There's not a whole ton of support. And we'll see if these Empire Knights manage to escape. What little bit of mobility will be very important here. But so far, it's looking like a very nice trade for Bretonnia.
Yeah, certainly. And only the one Peasant Bowman is online, and it only has under half models. And that's pretty much all of the ranged at this point for Bretonnia, which they do definitely...
But that's a big banishment. And
it will mostly get dodged.
All right. As you were.
Yeah, and so the Peasant Bowmen are firing in onto Halberdiers, but they aren't going to be doing a ton of damage. Now, the Empire at this point, I do wonder if maybe they should just box or blob or what. They might leave them a bit too open to getting surrounded and leadership bombed. I actually do think Bretonnia has a pretty good chance in this game just because they have pretty much total battlefield control, the ability to pick their engagements as much as they want. However, they will need some patient play and some good cavalry control in order to seal the deal.
Yeah, there is the problem too. Even though the balance of power is still decent for Empire, it's mostly being held up by Volkmar, who is very susceptible to cycle charges from Lewin. And that will be possible given how many knights there are and how many rallying infantry troops there are left for Bretonnia. The halberds in the distance get routed off too, and the Empire forces are being corralled into a very tight formation here. This can end very badly if there ends up being a mass rout, since the closeness of all these troops means that they
I think this might be where Bretonnia wins the game, because there is a mass charge on all flanks, Lewin providing terror. I would not be surprised at all with a mass break here. The Bretonnians do need to actually come in with the remainder of their forces and really make this a decisive blow. But you can see all of these Empire troops starting to waver and rout. And if they go, it should be no trouble at all for the Bretonnians to chase them off the battlefield, as the balance of power back into the favor of the Bretonnians, and Volkmar is not going to be doing very well surrounded by questing knights of Lewin.
Yeah, Lewin is still taking a few hits from Volkmar here, but it's not a huge worry. Lewin is still regenerating, as he hasn't routed yet during this battle, so he'll be able to safely cycle charge, and given his current HP, he can tank a few hits from Volkmar too. They're going to be seeing that, a nice pull away and dive in, even poisoning Volkmar too, to really secure that victory. Felix, realizing this, taps out of the game.
Yeah, close game. A nice try. Pretty strong build, I think. Just maybe not quite having the win conditions to match the trebuchets and the mass cavalry. I mean, giving up full battlefield control is always going to be difficult, but it is a hard matchup, so.
Yeah, totally understandable. If we look at the damage values here, those trebuchets did really well. They did manage to stay alive for most of the game, and they were shutting down priority targets. Stuff like the handgunners and the cannons.
I should clarify, because I see Romulan Dog in chat. So, it's not necessarily that Blessed Trebuchets are just...
Now, going into this game, it is going to be High Elves versus Skaven, with Golden Eagle versus Felix in game 2. Would you like to go over the Skaven first, or the High Elves?
I guess I'll go over the High Elves, because it looks like they have quite the fun build. So, we have Imric atop his Star Dragon, which is certainly an off-meta pick. One heck of a duelist, but very, very expensive for what he provides. We then have a Life Mage with Regrowth and Earthblood to babysit him, because he will need some babysitting for sure. We have the Rahagra's Pride War Lions of Trace ROR, quite strong against Skaven, just because the Skaven are such an infantry-heavy faction. We do see one Lion Chariots of Trace, which are actually very strong against Skaven, because they have such high missile resist that they can run through relatively easily. The only thing they really have to watch out for are Rat Ogres and other similar high mass pieces. We have a lot of cavalry. It looks like triple Silver Helm, and it looks like double Illyrian Reaver Archer with one regular Illyrian Reaver. And then just to round out the build, we have a couple of Rangers. So, how about the Skaven?
Well, for the Skaven, we're seeing a much more standard build here. The usual Poison Wind Mortars, this time only taking one. Can be risky if High Elves decide to snipe them out, but it does give him funds to take 2 Warplock Jezzails. So they'll be definitely giving some trouble to Imric, as their sniping power is quite strong. The dreaded Warlock Engineer too, with his Tempest Net-like ability. Very good, also with his armor and his missile attack. A little bit unconventional, but not absolutely terrible. And that's going to be the core of his army. Of course, like you mentioned earlier, we have Throt with his Rat Ogre summon, his anti-large debuffs to make sure nothing can land. With also a Plague Priest too. Well, this does make sense just because the, let's see, what is it called? The Howling Warp Gale. Only 5 winds of magic, even Overcast is not that expensive. So he does have time to throw down the summons and the winds of magic to do so. To hold off the High Elves, it's the usual. You have a bunch of clan rats, you have a bunch of Skaven slaves, and also the Council Guard. Just almost ubiquitous, oh god, a generally good infantry unit in all matchups. Just because they are unbreakable, they're high armored, they're very hard to kill. ROR Rat Ogres too. We haven't seen them a lot, but every once in a while players will take them, just because they do have the Norska Berserk buff, just from staying in combat.
Yeah, and I believe they have ITP, which regular Rat Ogres do not, if I'm not mistaken, so that's quite strong.
Yes, I don't believe they usually have ITP. So, very nice versus High Elves. As the game gets underway, we see some repositioning of the Skaven army. And they're looking to be facing off along the flank that Imric is coming in towards.
Yeah, and also, worth noting, the Warlock Engineer actually has Doom Rocket, which I am not sure how well that will do here. Definitely not a common pick. I'm wondering what he'll use it on.
It's more of a short range Arrow of Kurnos for infantry. At best, it'll hit some rangers, and if he's extremely lucky, maybe a grouped up blob of cavalry. But I'm not sure it will get that much damage. Its range is actually, I think, surprisingly short. We'll double check it and keep an eye on that guy. 200 meters, not insane, but a decent amount of range.
Now, this is a pretty cool deployment from the High Elves, actually coming in around this flank with about half their army, splitting up and essentially getting a full surround from the very beginning here. However, the Skaven do have this pretty nice little defensive pocket with one of their flanks covered by this terrain feature in the center of the map, and they are going to be able to get full range out of their Warplock Jezzails on the approaching High Elves.
Yeah, the Jezzails are making good contact, especially hitting these Reaver Archers. Means that the Rat Ogres won't be harassed by ranged fire, and also shooting into the lines of trace. Much less effective trade, since they do have that nice missile resist.
Yeah, the Lion Chariot's also getting fired at, but again, not a ton of damage, and what damage is put down can probably be healed quite easily if the High Elves choose to do so.
Yeah,
now, we will see an initial charge in from these Illyrian Reavers. Not going to be doing a ton, just getting some chip damage onto Skaven slaves. Nothing terribly important.
Yeah, and Imric currently staying nice and safely far back. He doesn't want to get netted by the Warlock Engineer until all of these Jezzails are shut down. You can see they're already firing off, trying to go for the Mage of Life, not a bad pick. And the summon catching these Illyrian Reavers is a nice pick.
Yeah, definitely. Now the Reavers should be able to get out, you know, without too much damage. And actually a really nice play here, managing to get onto the Natty Bubo sharpshooters with one of the Silver Helms. As looks like the Horn of Imric also going down. Dragonhorn and Starlance, which actually, man, that will do a ton of damage to Throt if he's able to get onto him. However, Throt managing to use his Rat Ogre summon to pin in some Silver Helms, and Imric, unfortunately, not targeting him immediately afterwards. So Throt will get away, it looks like, for the time being. And he is extremely fast, so should be difficult for Imric to catch him as well. So it looks like those buffs might be a little bit wasted here.
Ooh, and the net does go down on Imric. Puts him in a vulnerable position. With Throt now charging in, taking his advantage now. He has infantry support from the Tail Slashers. But Imric is still quite a scary fighter. We'll have to see how that fight turns out as the infantry begins collapsing for the Skaven. But the Council Guard are able to hold the line. They'll be able to win the fight against the Rangers, but they won't be able to do much to protect these Warplock Giselles. But a huge play coming in now. Imric is getting surrounded.
The Mage of Life, actually, his girlfriend is the one getting focused and getting taken down pretty low. Now, she manages to escape with almost half HP, so she will be there to continue babysitting Imric. But across the board, the High Elves are doing quite poorly and falling pretty far behind, I think, on the balance of power and in the game state. As the Skaven are able to stabilize. Ooh, and yeah.
Oh, but a counter from Imric does very well. If he lands 2 more, that could spell the end for Throt. Could result in a huge mass rout. But with Throt being able to maneuver around with his infantry support, it looks like he will be able to escape quite safely. Not to mention the fact that these Council Guard are still extremely healthy. In some situations they wouldn't be too useful, but here they're really able to help protect the range units of the Skaven. And for the High Elves, they're really just lacking a lot of numbers to be running over these forces. They're getting caught up a lot on infantry from the Skaven.
Yeah, and Throt is just so fast. I mean, 95 speed is significantly faster than Imric even when he's flying. So Throt really not in any risk of being caught at all. Just able to run away anytime Imric pops any buffs or gets near him. And because of that, the Skaven are able to dart around, avoid any bad engagements, and just kind of outlast this relatively fragile High Elf sort of pseudo-rush build.
Now, Imric is still at high HP. His Life Caster is down, but he's going for a Hail Mary play, charging in onto Throt, even though he is now surrounded by infantry, and a net will likely go down onto him. But Throt does manage to escape, and just barely keeps his leadership together.
Yeah, if these Illyrian Reaver Archers are able to kill Throt somehow, that might be enough to begin swinging this game back in the favor of the High Elves. However, I don't think that's going to be happening, as, man, this just horde of rats surrounding Imric. I mean, my goodness, imagine if there were any kind of AoEs for the High Elves to drop right now. That would be devastating. Now, Throt actually going in on top of Imric. If Imric turns around and... Ooh, he does manage to turn around and hit him. If he can get one more hit down, that might be enough to start a massive terror rout. Ooh, and he does.
Very
down
close.
To under 200 HP. Now, he needs to begin terror routing all of these Skaven off. He is actually engaging across the battlefield, so Imric certainly can legally pull out here. Definitely what he needs to do right now.
And it looks like that's going to be it. He does manage to escape. The cavalry helps with it by charging the infantry. But will Throt come back, and how well will these Council Guard do in the late game? They may take some very heavy breath attacks, but if they can survive that, there's not a lot to really kill them here.
Yeah, this is still looking quite rough for the High Elves, just because of the sheer numbers for the Skaven, which is, you know, relatively lore friendly, just outlasting the High Elves. Now, this is such an insane blob. Oh my gosh, if he got a crazy breath attack onto this ridiculous blob of Skaven, that might be enough to just single-handedly turn this game. However,
Oh,
It
and it
comes
does
in.
come down. Ooh, and not really the hit that he's looking for.
It does okay, but yeah, not as much as you might have hoped for. Imric actually, you cannot blame him for losing this game because he has 3,400 damage value right now.
Yeah,
and
those
he still
hits on
has
Throt.
almost all his breaths, I think.
Yeah, but the problem is, he didn't finish the job with escape, and ever slippery. Throt does manage to come back. He throws a heal on top of himself, and he is rushing back into the battle to provide leadership. But is it even needed with the mix of the Warlock Engineer and the Plague Priest? They give their encouragement buff to this blob of infantry here, and it means that terror routes will be much less effective. He might rout off some Skaven slaves, but a lot of the clan rats are expected to stay.
Yeah, I mean, Imric is slower than Throt, so I really see no way that he'll be able to catch him. He will eventually get a second breath attack. If he can, just get like the greatest breath attack of all time, it might be enough to start turning this game around. But in the meantime, the balance of power definitely very heavily in the favor of the Skaven, and rightfully so. They are very far ahead, I think, in the game state.
Yeah, the only problem is that their units along the fringes are getting picked off. The lion chariots are mobile enough and do enough damage where they will be able to chase off all of these fringe units. But in the end, it just amounts to some clan rats.
Ooh, Emmerich getting onto Throt somehow. Speed in this game is weird sometimes, but he misses. Oh my gosh, with all of his buffs popped with 75 charge bonus, he somehow misses onto Throt.
Even takes a little bit of damage from those rat ogres charging him in the back. Definitely a very unfortunate situation, and he'll have to be very careful too. He's on the verge of army losses, and oh man, it looks like another land does come down, but it's timed with a net. Oh, ooh, but slightly
totally denied.
Actually gets Imric stuck in the air instead of on the ground where he would have been surrounded.
Okay, there is a huge blob forming because the Skaven are literally just Control A right clicking. If Imric can get the breath attack right now, come on, Imric, we believe in you. This would be the greatest breath attack in the history of breath attacks. Come on.
Oh, and he targets the Council Guard, but the Council Guard pulled back.
Oh, that was a beautiful play, actually. You have to give respect. As much as I wanted to see this entire rat force get nuked, that was very well played.
Yeah,
and,
he pulled out
with that,
the exact unit he needed to.
Yeah, with that, it looks like Imric going in for one last suicidal charge. And he's somehow going to miss Throt again. And with that, he's definitely going to be getting dragged down here.
Yeah, very unfortunate situation for Imric. Under the current rule set, he is actually allowed to disengage to chase off some slaves and clan rats on the edge of the map, but that isn't really going to help him out in this situation.
No, Imric is going to go down, and that's going to be GG.
Yeah, now, just to emphasize that pull away from with the Council Guard. The actual icon that shows a breath attack is coming onto them flashes for maybe about a second. And it comes a second after. Not only that, your infantry moves slowly. So he likely, Felix was likely very prepared for the target to go on them. And read that situation, pulled them out, negating as much damage from the breath attack as possible. Was A plus play to make sure he didn't throw the game there.
Yep, definitely. Throt doing pretty well just to stay alive and somehow getting 2,000 value all the same. And also, that isn't even counting his Rat Ogre summon. Imric, 4,000 damage. Pretty amazing, honestly. Good try by him. Just the rest of the build kind of didn't work out. Now, I will give a shout out. I do like Morkoth's nickname for Throt in chat there, which is Speedy Gonzalez. I think that's
I like it. I like it. He was so slippery that game. There were 3 times, I think, where Imric charged in and missed his crazy high charge bonus attacks. Had he hit them, the game might have ended similarly, but nevertheless, it would have helped High Elves a lot. So, on the red side, we have Felix in the ace match playing as the Dwarves against the Dark Elves. For his build, has gone for a heavy Bugman's Ranger and Ranger Corps, counting up all the way to 7 of those range units. Will be able to demolish massive amounts of shades and also focus fire down elite infantry from the Dark Elves. But he'll have to make sure that he keeps them safe. Chariots will be able to run over them. Cavalry too, Harpies can shut them down. They do need quite a bit of protecting, but they're fairly hard to kill. To actually kill off chariots quickly, he has Iron Drakes, full hammer torpedoes, and also 2 normal units of Iron Drakes to deal with the elite infantry of the Dark Elves. His front line consists only of 4 Dwarf Warriors and a unit of Miners. Very thin, and it's extremely important that his massive amounts of damage carry him through. Finish off the build, the usual ROR Dragonback Slayers, a Rune Lord, and some cannons. So lots of anti-infantry, lots of anti-chariot. We'll just have to see if he's able to manage these guys and protect them so that they can do their jobs.
Yeah, on the other side, the Dark Elves coming in with Malekith atop a chariot with Soul Stealer and his usual abilities. We have a couple of Cold One chariots, it looks like 3 in total. A front line of Blackheart Corsairs with a few Harganeth Executioners mixed in. And a few Harpies, it looks like 3 in total, just to prevent any kind of air cheese. So, relatively narrow build from the Dark Elves. I could actually see it struggling to successfully kill off all of this ranged. However, there isn't a lot that will really slow it down either, just because the Dwarves have such a thin front line. The Harganeth Executioners and the Chariots will rip through it very easily, and the Dwarves might be in some trouble for that reason.
Yeah, this will come down a lot to how well these players actually maneuver their armies, and a lot less down for actual micro-wise. It's about having the Slayers in the correct position to catch chariots. It's about having Bugmans tanking the charges from chariots too, and using those blasting charges effectively on the correct infantry troop. Oh no, it looks like we are having some disconnects though. Dactor, are you still there? Alright, and it looks like Dactor sadly blue screened from the game. If you are speaking, we cannot hear you. So we'll have to carry out this game solo cast by the looks of it. Here, I'll send him a message. Looks like I guess he got full blue screened from on his thing. So, oh boy, I have the stream to myself, me and all you guys. So, here we go. We're going on for the Dwarves versus the Dark Elves. So, a lot of this is going to come down to the Harganeth Executioners and how well the Dwarves can actually take them out. It's extremely important that these guys actually get finished off, since if they are left alive at half HP, they will be able to cut down all of these dwarf units. So that means these Iron Drakes are going to have to kill them, along with some focus fire from the Quarrelers. So for the initial phases of the game, the cannon fires off, actually gets a ton of damage on the Cold One chariots. Amazing damage, really. That is quite a lot. And it looks to be continuing to focus fire it. This rock formation too will help delay the Dark Elf infantry from flanking around. But getting full surrounded is very rough here for the Dwarves. Another shot does come in, hits the chariot, doesn't take out any models though. But the lower this gets, the better things will be for the Dwarves, as they will be able to position along the left-hand side with their infantry.
I am back in the call.
Ah, wonderful. So we got Doctor back. Would you like me to screen share, or how do you want to carry this out?
That sounds excellent as a temporary fix.
Wonderful, wonderful. So the engagement is getting underway. The chariots have actually taken a good amount of damage from the cannons, and the dwarves are repositioning so that their warriors can stop the charge from the corsairs.
Yeah, so, and you can see this. This is a very it's not so much a wide build as it is a deep build, which is kind of interesting. The dwarves definitely going to be relying on just pure damage to protect itself, basically.
Yeah, which could be possible. There aren't a lot of infantry troops for the Dark Elves, but they have a lot of harpies and chariots. However, it looks like a little bit of a mistiming, actually having their Hargoneth executioners taking a ton of damage on the approach is a very good start for the dwarves. Harpies do move in now, and the chariots are converging, but we've already seen some volleys from the Iron Drakes and the Troll Hammers. Hargoneth executioners, though, are at high HP, and they have finally engaged the dwarven lines.
Yeah, a really good job of getting the harpies onto the key ranged units, the Iron Drakes and the Trollhammer torpedoes, rather than just the Rangers. However,
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it is. It is. It's actually looking very. Well, according to the balance of power, things are looking good for the dwarves.
Very good for the dwarves.
Yeah, but I am quite worried about these Hargoneth executioners. It will really depend on if they manage to stay in the fight. Also, the tear-shaped attack from Malekith goes down, and he has engaged. So, if we take stock at the major threats for the Dark Elves, executioners are still fighting and not routing. We have 2 Cold One chariots active, one actually in the midst of battle, and Malekith at high HP. Soul Stealer 2 comes down, and this is the point where the Dark Elves could really flip in the balance of power. Shutting down this many range units will be huge, and as the battle goes on, it's looking like the dwarves are having a really hard time actually finding positions for them to shoot.
Yeah, now the harpies are getting roasted pretty effectively. However, pretty much all of the dwarf range units are starting to get compromised. The Dark Elf infantry actually surviving just long enough to get back onto them is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, and the executioners now on top of the cannons, and it doesn't look like there are many threats left for a lot of these elite Dark Elf troops. The harpies are doing a great job. They've shut down the Rangers. But the balance of power is still in the dwarf favor. We'll see if they're able to pull things back. They don't have any range units in the back, and any that do rout will likely be chased off. The Slayers too have actually taken a ton of damage, I think, from Malekith and his abilities. But Malekith has taken a lot of damage himself. He charged some Iron Drakes and presumably took some Troll Hammer damage. But chariots are still doing okay. A little bit of a whiff from a Soul Stealer 2 means that the damage will be mitigated by a lot, but the Dark Elves are rapidly climbing back in the balance of power.
Yeah, and the healing is the more important part of the Soul Stealer, I think, honestly. Just keeping Malekith alive and healthy will be critical. And of course, this is a Rune Lord. It isn't Grom Brindal or another duelist character for the Dwarf Lord. So in the late game, not nearly as much power there. And you can see that the, all of a sudden, pretty much the entire dwarf front completely collapses. And the balance of power swings way back into the favor of the Dark Elves. Pretty strange, honestly, that it was where it was. But yeah, it seems to have corrected itself now to align with the game state, which is quite Dark Elf favored.
Yeah, and we're seeing really just the effective Dark Elf elements here pulling through. The executioners are still operational. The chariots too, although one is getting caught in some dwarf warriors. a brief moment of respite for the dwarves, but it really doesn't look like they'll be able to pull it back here. All of their high DPS units are just about gone, and it's simply just a cleanup now for the Dark Elves. So yeah, very, very, very rough situation, and we are expecting Golden Eagle to make it to the finals of the tournament today, unless something absolutely crazy happens for the dwarves.
Yeah, they really don't have any win conditions left, unfortunately. And I was surprised, actually, by the dwarf pick here. Maybe just not super confident in Norska, but they definitely have a better matchup into Dark Elves, I think, usually.
Yeah, I think so. Especially with the ranged heavy build. In some cases, you will be able to abuse misplays from your opponent. But here, Golden Eagle really pulling through, timing his engagement well enough where his troops were able to stay alive. Malekith does get slowed. It is just a Rune Lord, though. So he likely won't even have to run away. But continuing to create some distance is nice. He'll be able to charge these Rangers. And as soon as the slow does resolve, he does manage to escape. So there we go. The Rangers now routed. Dwarves on the verge of army losses, with really just the Rune Lord keeping the balance of power good. Now, someone does mention in chat, he might have just been expecting, our dwarf player here, Felix, he may have just been expecting a different build from the Dark Elves. He was quite well suited to deal with the more ranged heavy build, or maybe one with bolt throwers. So in terms of actual build selection, he was put in a pretty rough situation.
Yeah, it's that's always the risk when playing. I mean, dwarves in general have to deal with a lot of that guessing game, trying to figure out what the opponent might bring and countering it. Just because the dwarves actually have pretty like they have a lot of specialist units, I guess you might say, rather than units that are good against everything. They most of their power are in units that are really, really good at killing a specific thing. So
yeah, and in this case, the cannon did do extremely well versus the chariots. Just not enough. There were way too many targets for the cannon to do its job. The troll hammer torpedoes too, they paid for themselves, but with 3 elite chariot units, it was just too much. Yeah, now getting into the finals between Golden Eagle and Call Harmon, Dark Elves against High Elves. I flipped that accidentally, but whatever. Which faction would you like to get into?
I guess I'll go over the High Elves here.
Cool,
so
cool.
We do have Larry with Tempest, Earthblood, and Star of Avalor. We then have a Star Dragon, which of course is very often comboed with Larry. Very, very strong dragon. We have a couple of Eagle Claw Bolt Throwers. We have some Silverin Guard, quite interesting. Not the most common pick here, I think, but a very solid unit all the same. We have a core of Silver Helms, 2 in total, a couple of Illyrian Reaver Archers, a Lion Chariot of Trace, and that looks to be about it. So pretty top-heavy, small elite build here, but not as top-heavy as it maybe could be with Dragon Princes. So what do the Dark Elves have to counter this?
For the Dark Elves, we are seeing a much wider build, although fairly small and elite in and of itself. Of course, we're seeing those dreaded Hargoneth Executioners. They can win most infantry matchups on their own, even after taking a good amount of damage. And they don't really need a ton of protection either. You can just march them up onto the High Elf front lines. They'll be able to win quite hard. For the cavalry, Cold One Knights, and just a single unit of repeater crossbows mounted on cavalry. A single, 2 units of shades. 1 unit of the Bolt Fiends. They come with Shield Breaker, which is nice if you want to be shooting at the High Elf front line. In this case, it may be useful versus Silverin, but mostly these guys will be used to fire at cavalry and the dragon here. Feral Manticore and a Supreme Sorceress of Fire won't dominate the air, but can get some nice counter charges if the High Elves get a little bit too reckless. So a good amount of range support, some a much stronger cavalry or much stronger infantry front line, and a much stronger ranged core, just lacking a bit on the single entity front. We'll have to see how this goes.
I am quite concerned. This Supreme Sorceress of Fire might have a very hard time because she is going up against Tempest with a Star Dragon and Larry, and also double Bolt Thrower. Could very easily burst her out of the sky. I'm not sure how Tempest and a Star Dragon Breath combos into a Manticore, but I could definitely see it doing a ton of damage, and it's not like there's any healing for the Supreme Sorceress. So if she gets brought down very low, that could be enough to give the High Elves a decisive advantage in this game.
Yeah, as for the cavalry, the Silver Helms, we'll likely not be able to do a whole ton. Their cycle charging on the infantry is great, but the core targets, these Executioners and the Cold One Knights, are going to be hard for the High Elves to deal with, relying mostly on the Star Dragon and its breath attacks. Both sides have a few things to worry about, different win conditions, but like you said, that Supreme Sorceress will have to be extremely careful. Getting too close to Alarielle will likely get her out of the battle, if not completely. Will put her low enough where she can't really engage. So this is a really strange build from the High Elves starting off. It's a low model count army, but it also has a lot of bolt throwers. It means that they can't really kite. And I'm not sure how I feel about that exactly. How about you, Doctor?
Yeah, it might not be the most synergistic build. Typically, you would see more targets for Larry to heal with this kind of build, but we'll have to see. I think if the Supreme Sorceress can be sniped early, then the Star Dragon might be able to just hard carry this game. Although I would definitely like to see Golden Eagle be more aggressive with his Tempest right now. I mean, right now he could very easily Tempest the Supreme Sorceress and start shooting it with bolt throwers and try and breath attack it and see if he can get a pick. But instead, choosing to be a little more conservative with his Winds of Magic, playing a slower game, all things considered. And unfortunately for him, there isn't really much of a front line, and the bolt throwers are already very near to getting compromised. Now, the big Tempest is going down. How much damage will this do?
Oh, likely a good amount. Not opting for a Dragon Breath attack on the Supreme Sorceress, maybe saving it for the Elite Infantry. And it looks like the Supreme Sorceress might be able to get out of that without taking too much damage.
It was just a regular casted one as well. I think that could have been a much bigger play if Golden Eagle had committed harder to it.
Yeah, however, and we are seeing, as the fight goes on, the Silver Helms get demolished by the Cold One Knights and Executioners. But the Chariots do well against the left side Executioners as the right flank engagement begins. How are you feeling about this?
I think this is a really nice fight, actually, for the High Elves. They are near Shades, and Star of Avalorn, yeah, there it goes down. We'll keep all these units nice and healthy. However, the rest of the battlefield isn't going particularly well for the High Elves. With that being said, the Bolt Throwers are still somehow firing. A little bit of a lapse in micro from Cal Harmon, but he will get these Dread Spears onto them now. And it's appearing to be a relatively close battle, actually, as the Shades are getting compromised, and the Dark Shards as well. This could actually be enough to swing it in the favor of the High Elves decisively.
Yeah, the Dark Elves really need those the range support to be alive here to deal with the dragon. Executioners are great, of course, but cycle charging can be quite scary. And with the Dark Rider repeater crossbows getting chased off by Illyrian Reavers, means that there's not a whole lot of firepower left for the Dark Elves. They do, let's see, they do manage to catch some, the Lion Chariots of Trace, but it looks like even those will be able to escape.
Yeah, and the Feral Manticore rampaging into Larry and the Star Dragon will just be getting completely wasted here. Man, these Shades are just taking a ton of damage and getting compromised very easily. It's really strange how this worked out, actually. I guess the High Elves, with enough of a mobility advantage and picking good engagements to kill off the Dark Elf cavalry able to get quite an advantage here. However, here comes the Dark Elf AoE buff. And will that be enough for them to turn the battle? I'm not sure, especially with Tempest still present as a threat for the Supreme Sorceress. All the damage will be permanent, and if the Dark Elves don't have magic, I don't really see a way for them to come back into this game at this point.
Yeah, some fireballs could be sent down towards single entities of the High Elves. The dragon is a little bit spread out from its different targets. Charge does come down onto Alarielle too, but it is just a Supreme Sorceress. She won't be able to do too much damage. With really the main strength of the Dark Elves staying in their elite Hargonet Executioners. But these Lion Chariots are a hard counter to them. And we're seeing a charge in now, right as a Tempest goes onto the Supreme Sorceress of Fire.
And this is again just a regular casted Tempest, and again not going to be much follow-up. I would like to see a breath attack here onto this kind of blob of Hargonet Executioners. I do wonder if that's going to come in right now.
And it looks like opting instead for a charge, shutting down those important range units for the Dark Elves. The dragon will likely be able to escape, but...
Ooh, getting a ton of damage onto the Supreme Sorceress now too.
Yeah, we'll see. Misses an attack, but a second hit will likely cause her to rout.
Yeah, Cascading Fire Cloak is actually a really nice cast here, raising the Supreme Sorceress's melee defense up to 58. And with that, it looks like the Star Dragon is struggling to hit her. The Star Dragon definitely wants to get out of there at this point. It needs some support. However, the Dark Elf's trying to trap it in with the last remaining few Cold Knight models.
Oh, and the Manticore's coming in too. This could be a huge swing play if the dragon actually gets routed off here.
Yeah, now Star will come off cooldown soon, but I don't think it's off cooldown just yet. And this... Oh, here it goes. Yeah.
Oh, but the dragon
it
gets
routs.
routed.
Ooh, that is really big.
That is absolutely huge. It is now imperative that the dragon gets chased off. But the fact that the Supreme Sorceress, with very low combat stats and just one spell, managing to rout off a Star Dragon is insanely big. She's now moving out to chase it. She does begin flying.
Okay, if he needs to get a Tempest onto it, I think.
Yeah, but does he have the Winds of
that's his
Magic?
win condition. Yeah, I don't know. He hasn't been using Earthbloods really. But Larry's going the wrong way. Larry needs to go and chase down that Supreme Sorceress right now.
Yep, it looks like opting rather to not attempt to chase. The Supreme Sorceress is already very far away. But
oh my god, this is so weird. This is like the Great Race or something.
Man, what a crazy swing play, but there's still a lot of cavalry for the High Elves. The problem is, where are those Lion Chariots? He really needs them.
He's definitely trying to get a Tempest down right now, man. This is crazy. You can see him continuously like recasting it. Oh, and what's the range on Tempest? Dragon. I've never asked this question before, but what's the range on Tempest?
I believe 150 meters. If I had to give a random guess, maybe 200 meters.
It's gonna be close.
And the fact that the dragon is a lot slower than Alarielle, so just because the Supreme Sorceress is chasing it, Alarielle will be able to slowly gain speed. An attack animation gets the Sorceress closer too, and the Tempest could very well go down. This is the deciding factor of the game, whether or not the dragon gets routed off. It will be a huge swing for the Dark Elves, so we're keeping a close eye onto it, but the edge of the map is extremely close now.
He must not have had the Winds of Magic. That is so unfortunate.
That is very rough. At best, he'll be able to get a kill on the Supreme Sorceress now. Oh, but there we go.
Goodbye, the dragon is off. Man, what a cowardly Star Dragon, by the way. Routing off with 2,000 HP and never coming back.
Now, the Supreme Sorceress is stuck in combat with Alarielle. Cascading Fire Cloak, still very confident as a fighter, is going to be engaging in melee there as we take a look at the remaining infantry for the Dark Elves. Somewhere along the way, the Lion Chariots actually did manage to get killed, and that is terrible for the High Elves, given how much infantry is left for the Dark Elves. Cycle charging would have been amazing in this situation, but sadly, that doesn't look to be the case.
Yeah, and Larry cannot kill all of this by herself. She needed the Star Dragon with her. With the Star Dragon, I really do think that the High Elves would have won this game, but unfortunately, the Tempest comes in now, but just a bit too late. And yeah, this is definitely looking very rough for the High Elves right now. Now, the Supreme Sorcerers might go down, but it's really not that big of a deal anymore.
Yeah, and nevertheless, the Supreme Sorceress is hitting back surprisingly well. Her combat stats are lower than Alarielle's, and she will go down, but not before a very nice fight. Those cascading fire cloaks really swung the battle in the favor for the Dark Elves there. Doing much better than I would have expected.
Now, can the Harganeth Executioners and Dreadspears get killed off by Larry and some Illyrian Reaver archers? That would be beyond wild. It's not like Larry has any damage spells of any kind. So she's going to struggle to do enough damage, I think. She's not exactly a combat lord. And these Harganeth Executioners are looking really healthy. I don't know.
Yeah, the Executioners at half HP. Oh, plus another unit too at quarter HP. Their leadership is high enough where the fear from Alarielle and charges in the back will usually not be enough to rout them off. So even with some A+ cycle charging, they'll be able to take out the cavalry, and as soon as the cavalry is gone, Alarielle won't be able to do too much in this fight.
Yeah, the Illyrian Reaver archers definitely not strong enough melee combatants to hold in there long enough for Alarielle to get full value from her cycle charging. I don't see a way for the High Elves to win this game. However, we will see. Maybe some crazy leadership bomb will come in. Earthblood, I don't know if Golden Eagle will have the magic for that anytime soon. Now, Larry comes in and will get some damage onto the Harganeth Executioners. I actually bring them to 20 leadership. 20 leadership is more than enough. And yeah, that looks to be game one going in favor of Cal Harmon, as the High Elves are going to get dragged down here, almost certainly.
Yep, Reavers trying to cycle charge, but just pulling away takes too much damage. And that's the Reavers down. Alarielle taking damage quite rapidly on the verge of routing. And GG. A crazy comeback from the Dark Elves there. Managing to pull out just a snipe on that dragon. The Supreme Sorceress really deserves a promotion there. She got
2,900 damage.
Yeah, and that was basically all in melee too. That was insane. The Manticore coming back at the last moment too. Just a crazy swing play. I don't even know, but really I think the opportunity to snipe out that Supreme Sorceress there with Overcast Tempest and some breath attacks, that likely would have been able to secure an easy win for the High Elves, I think.
Yeah, definitely some bad RNG with the melee attacks from the dragon. Also, really nice use though of Cascading Fire Cloak from Cal Harmon to manipulate that a bit. And yeah, just crazy stuff.
Yeah, not a coincidence that there were a lot of misses going down. He was using his spells at in fact, his spell usage in general this game was very strong and well timed. With just a little bit of RNG pulling out an insane win for the Lizardmen of Cal Harmon, up one game. He has brought a good number of skirmishers. The ROR Pterodon Riders again, seeing them for the second time during this tournament. These guys are great because they have a little bit more damage, and I'm not sure exactly what else. Do you know what these guys have over normal Pterodon Riders?
You know, I am not entirely sure, actually.
Looks like they have dodge,
like
physical resist.
Yeah, it's physical resist, it looks like.
Yeah, just 20%. Nice if you want to win the skirmish game. Nothing too crazy. Chameleon Skinks, 2 of them. Almost a standard pick for all Lizardmen builds. and especially nice versus Outriders. They're small models, and their counterfire plus their range is really nice in that situation. They'll even trade evenly into grenade launchers, which cost more than these chameleon skinks. To continue on with the skink theme, we're seeing skink cohort javelins, which will be more effective in the water thanks to their aquatic ability. Red crested skinks 2, aquatic, also cohort of Sotek. But the actual important pieces for the Lizardmen forces, we got Cold One Riders, mobility, skink chief, and a red crested skink chief on a what's it, a Stegodon by the looks of it, unless I'm misreading.
I believe very it's an nice ancient Stegodon, yeah. Actually.
Ancient Stegodon with his will give him some really nice combat stats. Very high armor, extremely hard to take down. For the magic, Skink Priest of Heavens, and that's about it. I guess really just to hit up that infantry. Yeah, I guess that really is it. With some Saurus mixed in. So it's looking like mostly an anti-kite or a kite style build.
Yeah, and it will be going up against more of a defensive formation with Volkmar the Grim, a Bright Wizard with Burning Head and Fireball, a couple of Empire Knights, the Hammer of Witch's Great Cannon, and then we also have the Silver Bullets, Handgunners ROR, a single Outrider, and then just a ton of infantry. It looks like it is a front line of 2 swordsmen. Looks like a total of actually only 3 spearmen, and then 4 halberdiers in the back, and then also the ROR Sigmar Sons swordsmen, which are unbreakable, just to provide a bit of morale and make sure that that front line isn't broken too quickly.
Yeah, another extremely heavy infantry Empire build here. We're seeing some playstyles emerge between these players. I think these types of builds were consistent with what they played before, right?
Relatively, yeah. I think Cal Harmon really does like his balanced builds and a little bit off meta in terms of magic choices. Whereas, yeah, Golden Eagle seems to really like infantry heavy styles.
Yeah, we'll have to see how it plays out. He should be able to win out against the Skinks, but the Saurus will really have to be dealt with using cavalry, cycle charging, or Volkmar.
Yeah, and the Skink Priest of Heavens actually could get a ton of value this game, just wind blasting halberdiers and swordsmen.
I think so. Now, Empire holding their position due to their cannon means that the aquatics for the Lizardmen will mostly be negated, except for maybe in the center of the map. As the Outriders get a little bit of chip damage on the Pterodon Riders, taking the tiniest amount of damage themselves, just some light skirmishing on both sides.
Yeah, just a bit of chip damage on either side, nothing really decisive happening. No big sniping efforts either, just little bits of damage here and there.
Yeah, and at this point, that should be mostly an advantage for the Lizardmen. I think they're happy to just be closing the distance here against the artillery. And I'm interested to see how this frontline fight engage happens. It's a lot of skinks against state troops, which neither of them are especially crazy combatants. Usually used as chaff, but both sides have decent fighters. It's really the Saurus warriors that are going to tip the balance here, I think.
I really think this game is going to come down more than anything to the wind blasts. If there are really high value wind blasts, then I definitely favor the Lizardmen being able to break through this front line effectively. But if they aren't as good, then I think the Lizardmen will really struggle to grind through all of this chaff.
Yeah, there is the big problem though for Empire. This red-crested skink chief will likely be able to duel out Volkmar. His main threats, however, are the Silver Bullets and of course the Hammer of the Witches. Pterodon Riders coming in too, presumably for a rock drop, are taking some pretty heavy heat on the advance. Now they've moved past at least one of them, and they might dive in on the cannon. We'll have to see. Meanwhile, the skink chief getting a bit out of position. Same with Volkmar.
Yeah, this is a very aggressive play here from the red-crested skink chief, just diving directly onto some spearmen. Now Volkmar might get a really nice slow fire bombardment, but it actually looks like a nice dodge, just force pathing the cohort of Sotek through. But this red-crested skink chief already down to nearly half HP. It is taking a ton of damage.
Yeah, not to mention that there is no healing here for the Lizardman. This guy is just going to be continuing to take chip damage until the Hammer of the Witches goes down.
Now, important play here, the Pterodon Rider is going back to try and get some rock drops onto these silver bullets. If he can do that and shut them down, then the red-crested skink chief might be able to stabilize and do quite well the remainder of this battle. However, he does need to make sure to get those rock drops down, as Golden Eagle trying to dodge. Ooh, but a huge rock drop, doing so much damage. Almost one-shotting the silver bullets, actually. However, the Outriders are still online. They're still doing really good work into the red-crested skink chief, who is now down to 3,500 HP. And the Lizardmen are a little bit disjointed, I think, with their advance. Not really coming in across the board at the same time. And also the Skink Priest of Heavens, quite slow on the draw with his Wind Blast. I don't think he's actually cast one yet.
Yep, one appears to have gone down, or perhaps a different spell.
And he actually, he misclicks the harmonic conversions. He must have clicked off too quickly. And then he clicks back onto the Skink Priest to recast it, but it doesn't quite work out. Now, he does get a nice Wind Blast onto some swordsmen, but he really needs to be breaking through this front line very quickly now and getting onto these Outriders, because they will kill this red-crested skink chief if left to fire for even just a little bit longer.
Yeah, he's been taking a whole ton of damage this game, but the balance of power is still looking to be in the Lizardmen's favor. They are dominating the infantry fight now. The only problem is that Volkmar in the late game is quite the threat. You definitely want to be cycle charging him, but perhaps the Skink Chief in the back with his missile attacks will be able to help out. It will likely be pretty dicey though if his Lord actually goes down. But for the Empire backline, things are collapsing quite heavily, and the Halberds and the right flank is looking a little bit rough.
Yeah, and meanwhile, a Banishment going down onto some Saurus, not actually doing much damage, so those Saurus are remaining very healthy. And, the Fireball misses from literally 1 foot away. And, man, the red-crested skink chief is like, who threw that? And turns and is gonna get a big bit of damage onto this Bright Wizard. And if the Bright Wizard gets picked off, that'd be really huge, because that is one of the big things that the Empire has for chaff clearing right now.
Yeah, after that, it would really just be Volkmar. And Volkmar is good, but having those burning heads is really, really important. Looks like a spell coming in from the wizard, but I'm not sure if that went off.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Now, these skink cohorts doing some pretty good work into the halberdiers, and man, the Empire infantry just across the board not doing too well. Now, a burning head coming down onto these Saurus warriors' shields.
Yep, not going to do a whole ton of damage though.
A ton of damage, but it will be okay.
It does a decent amount, but the Saurus will be able to stay in combat. And with the Skink Chief alive, he's now able to rout off the right flank for the Empire. That is quite a crushing blow. There's actually not a hole left to hold for these single entities here.
Yeah, man, this seems to be decisively going in the favor of the Lizardmen. Just doing a great job of picking apart this Empire defensive formation, using his AoEs well. Another Wind Blast coming down, wrecking the Sigmar Sons. And, yeah, just really nice use of the infantry as this Empire frontline really collapses.
Yeah, not to mention, the Skink Chief in the back, the hero, just constantly firing away at Volkmar and the cavalry here. His chip damage is not amazing, but in the late game, it will bring Volkmar closer to his healing cap, which will be very important.
Meanwhile, the Bright Wizard getting terrified by the red-crested Skink Chief, who, man, went down to under half HP in the opening moments of the game and is somehow still healthy enough to be rampaging in the backline without any worries and just killing things, getting a ton of value in.
Yeah, just being extremely effective here. He still has 1,300 HP, more than half the life of just a footcaster at full HP, and with that amount, he'll likely be able to start cycle charging Volkmar to death, even looking to take that engagement now. Starting to charge in, and his ranged attack is doing a lot of damage too.
Yeah, the machine gun on the Ancient Stegodon shouldn't be underestimated. He does quite a bit of damage and also poisons everything, so...
Yep, and this is looking like the big climactic fight between the lords. He's going to charge in. King Chief getting support from the Cold One Riders and also landing in a pretty nice charge, taking some damage himself though. This actually might get a little bit risky. If the Skink Chief dies, I could see some terror routes going down by using Volkmar.
Yeah, the Skink Chief at 1100 HP, but he now has some support from Cold One Riders and Saurus coming in. And with that help, I think it should be enough for him to tank any damage. Now, Volkmar will have his AoEs back up soon, I think, and if he can get a really nice cast onto all these Saurus and the Cold One Riders, it could be pretty impactful. However, I don't know if it's going to be enough at this point, as the Lizardmen just taking a big advantage pretty much across the entire battlefield, as the remaining Empire units starting to get cleaned up. There really isn't much that the Empire has left in this battlefield just in general.
Yeah, essentially it is just Volkmar, and he has not hit the Skink Chief in quite some time. Meanwhile, taking a lot of damage himself, his heal cap now showing. Hits the Skink Chief, but only for 100 damage, just because he is being poisoned, and he's not a specialist against these high armored opponents. So taking a look at the rest of the battlefield, while keeping an eye on that duel, the Empire infantry is all but gone. It's essentially just Volkmar and the unbreakable units left, with the Skink Chief continuing to fight on at still very high HP. It's at 600, its leadership, still maintaining at 20 despite barely being able to see his health bar. Now at 450, he is looking to die to Volkmar here, but I'm not sure if Volkmar will be able to carry it out. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no chance, I think, at this point. Volkmar is good, but he's not that good. And it's about to be army losses as well, as only the unbreakable troops of the Empire are remaining. A banishment does kill some Skink cohorts with javelins, but not going to do even close to enough to swing this game.
Boy.
As the red-crested Skink Chief with 77 HP will survive the entire battle somehow. And with that, Cal Harmon will be taking this tournament.
Yeah, and very well played too. We followed two of his games, two of his best of threes leading up to this. He has been playing a good deal of the ranked ladder. It appears it finally paid off with a very nice game. Empire against Lizardmen. That Skink Chief, man, so much damage went into him, but he just barely managed to keep it together. Yeah, I really would have thought that the initial damage there would have taken him out of the battle, but surprisingly not.
Yeah, I think it was really the Pterodon Riders that carried the day there. They got huge rock drops onto the value pieces of the Empire backline, and then they managed to just stay alive and continuously harass and charge and chase things off the battlefield and just do a ton of work over the course of the battle.
Yeah, looking at the silver bullets too, getting in only less than 200 damage. Really showing that they got shut down by the Pterodon Riders. And the snipe on the caster too. Things are really working out quite well going into the mid and the late game for the Lizardmen. Not to mention Volkmar really just not being able to duel single entities in the late game. He actually has extraordinarily low melee defense and not a lot of AP. And that gives him a pretty rough time. He's great versus infantry, but not in this situation. Not to mention too, the mass infantry strategy from the Empire just really not proving itself this tournament, sadly.
Yeah, and I mean it can be strong, but really nicely checked into by the Lizardmen with the Skink Priest of Heavens and the Saurus. Not overcommitting to the cavalry, and yeah, just really well played by him.
Yeah, so there we go. GG, well played. Call Armin. Let's see, I'll get contact in a sec. So, there we go. Closing it out just in time for my expected finish time for the tournament. And it is going to go to the victor, Cal Harmon. Extremely well played. We also had some very nice games today. There were some extremely close ones, with my favorite really being that High Elf against Dark Elf game with the crazy comeback. And I'm excited to host some more tournaments in the future. I'm thinking probably not this week, but one next week. So look forward to that. And thank you very much to all the players playing today. Thank you very much to you, Dactor, for supporting me during this long stream. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Just the typical thanks to everyone who watched. Thanks to everyone who played. Hope you have a great day. And thanks for hosting Enticity. Yep. I'll see you all next time.
Yep. Wonderful. So with that, a little bit of plugging. The usual. YouTube and stuff, it's all down below. There's not much I need to go over. It's been a long stream. If you can tell, I'm pretty sure we're both on the verge of passing out, becoming unconscious. I am not playing in Turin's tournament, sadly. If you are talking about the faction war, I did get knocked out there. But if he is streaming, I will post a link to that so that you guys can hop over. Let's see. It looks like it is going on in 10 minutes. So anyone that wants to take a look at that, feel free to. Oh, for the YouTube crowd, I'll end it off here. Thank you very much for watching.